The real test never happens on the stage. Would you trust them with something nobody will notice? But those are exactly the moments where a weak leader can still appear strong. Leadership education shouldn't produce impressive students. Every year, thousands of students in Singapore graduate with excellent results. And every year, the same question quietly follows them out the gate. Are they actually ready? I'm Ernest Tang. This is Beyond the Report Card. Let's go beyond. Every school has a student like this, the one who speaks well during assembly, who leads the group during discussions, and gets picked for the welcome committee. And many school leaders might have, at some point in time, been wrong about that particular student. We're trained to spot leadership in the moment a school controls the stage, the interview, the CCA showcase. But those are exactly the moments where a weak leader can still appear strong. The real test never happens on the stage. It happens when something is quietly assigned, unglamorous, and easy to give up. So think of a student leader in your school right now. Would you trust them with something nobody will notice, even if they failed at it? By the end of this particular video today, you will have a simple way to tell the difference between a student who performs leadership well and the one who really carries it, and a practical way to test the difference for that before you hand over responsibility, not after. Leadership education shouldn't produce impressive students. It should produce trustworthy ones. Here is the pattern. Schools select student leaders on visible traits: confidence, articulation, likability, willingness to volunteer in front of a group. Those are important. Those traits are quite useful, but they are not evidence of trustworthiness. They are evidence of comfort in public, and the gap only shows up later on. When the role asks for something, the stage never did. Consistency, follow through, owning a mistake that nobody saw. I've sat in enough leadership program debriefs to watch the same story repeat with different student names. A student is chosen to lead a small project group because they interviewed pretty well and they spoke confidently during the selection. Weeks in, teammates quietly start doing that particular student's share of the work because the deadline slips. Messages go unanswered, and when something goes wrong, the explanation always is that person, never me. Nothing about the student's state of presence actually changed. What changed was the test. Responsibility asked a different question than the interview did, and the answer was different. It is not only our appointed leaders, we have all had that group mate as well. So if you're a school leader, head of department, CCA teacher in charge, responsible for selecting and developing student leaders, this distinction isn't academic. It decides who you can actually hand task to. The purpose of student leadership is not visibility, it is responsibility. So here's the lens. I call it the image versus responsibility test, and it has 4 signals. 1. Visibility signals. How a student performs when they are being watched. 2. Ownership signals. Whether they follow through on task when no one is watching them and checking on them. 3. Recovery signals. How do they respond when something that happens under their watch goes wrong? 4. Consistency signals, whether the behavior changes depending on who is in the room. We'll go through each one with a concrete way to observe in an ordinary school week and not in a special leadership showcase. To be honest, you don't need a new leadership program to start testing this out. You just need one small unglamorous responsibility and a willingness to watch what happens. Here's the Singaporean version. Give a student leader something low visibility but real. Maybe collect the attendance, maybe to take the attendance by a certain deadline, making sure there is a shared resource that is returned after it is used. Nothing massive, nothing that requires any applause at the accomplishment of that particular task. Something that matters only when it is done properly. So this week, hand one current student leader a small task with zero audience. No one's watching it. And note whether it happens on time, unprompted, or without the need for you to chase that person. Responsibility is not the reward of leadership, it is The test. Visibility signals tell you how a student behaves when an audience is present. They rarely tell you anything else. Confidence in front of a group draws on comfort with attention, not on character. Schools over-index it because it is the easiest thing to observe and reward. A student can rehearse a strong stage presence far more easily than they can rehearse trustworthiness. Think about a selection for captain, president, and what happens is a short speech, a few questions, and the room forms the impression within a couple of minutes. That impression is almost entirely built on visibility signals. It tells you nothing about whether that same student will chase a teammate over something overdue a couple of weeks later with no one watching. So separate the interview or the speech from the decision. Use it to understand the leader's communication style, not to decide on that leader's trustworthiness. A confident student is not automatically a responsible one, and don't let the loudest signal, which is visibility, be the only signal. Ownership is what a student does when nobody is confirming whether they did it. It shows up in unglamorous middle of the task situations, not the beginning, not the finish. Students with poor ownership often perform well at the announcement stage, then maybe quietly disengage once the task becomes routine. And it's easy to mistake early enthusiasm for sustained responsibility, because in week one, the two things do look pretty identical. So there were two students, same logistical task for an event. One checks in without being asked, flags a problem earlier, very proactive. The other says pretty enthusiastically at the briefing, and then has to be reminded a couple of times before the deadline, and that task wasn't done properly. From the onset, both look equally capable, but only in the middle did the task tell the truth its part. So build in one unprompted check-in part through anything that is delegated. Don't ask, is it done? Ask, where are you with it? And notice who volunteers the answer before being asked that question. Enthusiasm at the beginning of a task is quite cheap. Follow through in the middle of it isn't. It is the point. How a student responds when something goes wrong under their watch tells you more than a year of leadership ever will. A missed deadline, a conflict, isn't a leadership failure by itself. How the response from the student is the actual signal. The ones who default to explaining why it wasn't their fault, pushing the blame away, not taking responsibility, is not the one you want. The one who names the gap, owns it, proposes a fix for it, is exactly that very same trait that you aim to develop and have in all of your leaders. There was a story of someone when there was a shared project falls behind. The difference is quite immediate in two students. Here is a story of what happened with two students when there was a project assigned to them and how they did reflected their own internal ownership capability. One student move is to explain circumstances. My dog ate it. I had to handle my sick sibling, etc. Another's move is to say what didn't work and what they are willing to do differently. Both are equally likable, both great communicators, but only one shows the leadership maturity that we are looking for. So the next time a student leader's responsibility goes wrong in a tiny fashion, resist fixing it immediately. Ask them what do they think went wrong and what they would do next. Watch whether the answer points outwards or inward. Leadership maturity is not proven by avoiding the mistakes, it is proven by what the student does after the mistake is committed. A student's real character is the version of them that shows up when the audience changes. Some students behave one way in front of teachers, another in front of peers, another again when alone with a junior. That gap itself is a warning sign because trustworthy leadership doesn't change shape depending on who is actually watching, and consistency is difficult to fake over time, which is why the most reliable signal of the four is consistency. There was a prefect who was composed and respectful with teachers, but pretty dismissive towards the junior prefects the moment there weren't any teachers around. That itself is telling you something pretty important. The good behavior was for audience sake. It is not the true internal character value of that student. And it's not unusual. It is just easy to miss if the version of the student you ever want to see is the one that is what you're looking for in the performance. So ask a colleague who sees the student unsupervised. Not necessarily a colleague itself, maybe even, but probably a junior, and ask them do a 360-degree feedback session. Cross-reference it according to what you see, and if there's any discrepancy, know that that is probably who you don't want to put some effort and investment in. Consistency is the one leadership trait that cannot be rehearsed for an audience because there's no audience. It's supposed to appear in every single audience. So none of the four signals ask whether a student can speak well. None of it. All four ask whether can a student be trusted. That is pretty important. Visibility signals are the easiest to see and the least reliable to trust. Ownership and recovery are only revealed when the task or the mistake is real. Finally, consistency across the audience is the signal that is the hardest to fake and the easiest to overlook because we are not trained to do so. So here's your action plan for the coming week. Step 1. Decouple selection from the performance. When you next select or review student leaders, use the interview or speech to understand the communication style only. Make trustworthy calls from observed responsibility, not from their presentation. Step 2. Build one unprompted test into a real task. Hand a student leader something low stakes, low visibility, but real, and then add a single mid-task check-in. Where are you with it? And note who volunteers before being asked and how they respond if something goes wrong. 3. Cross-reference the unsupervised version. Ask a colleague who sees the students when the adults aren't in the room, or maybe even ask their fellow peers how the behavior is, and compare it with the version that consistency is the signal that is worth protecting. If this video gives you an idea on what changes you might want to do to look at one student leader in your school, then thank you very much, it has done its job. Because the real work isn't spotting the difference between image and responsibility, it is building programs that develop that responsibility in the first place. So you're not left testing for a trait that the student was never helped to grow. That's the work we do at Leaven Academy. If you would like to explore how we can support your school in developing student leaders who can be trusted with real responsibility and not purely the stage, do reach out to us, and the information is in the description down below, or you can email me at ernest@leavenacademy.com. And if you like the videos that we are putting out so far, it would be a great help if you would like the video here, subscribe to our channel so you get first dips into when our new video comes out, and most importantly, give us your comments because all of them will be read. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.